Okay, I'm gonna,
Wow.
okay, there we go.
Hey.
All right, Clara, take it away.
All right. Well, once again, good afternoon, and thank you so much for extending the invitation. Thank you, Tony and Paulette, for coordinating my being here this afternoon. So I'm going to, as you see, I'm going to be sharing about House of Jelly, which is the nonprofit organization that I founded. And hopefully, we can have a dialogue after. If you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. I think I have a feeling that you will. But Paulette, if we can go ahead, perhaps with, so the name of the organization is the House of Jelly. And our mission is to promote Pan-African arts and cultures here in Maryland and beyond, and thereby creating and strengthening bonds of solidarity and friendship across the African diaspora, and also foster cross-cultural diplomacy around the globe. So as you can see, this has two folds, because we recognize that we don't exist as just alone in some part of the world. We need to be working together, whether as people of African descent as a group, but also with the bigger community, if you will. So that's why cross-cultural interactions are so important, and that's why it's included. So our vision is a world of solidarity and friendship among all people of African descent, and by extension, all peoples of the world. And we have been a nonprofit since fall of 2021, and we're based in Montgomery County here in Maryland. So one of the questions that comes up often is, what does that mean? Jelly, is it like peanut butter and jelly? Not quite. It sounds like it, but it's not. So in West African cultures, the jelly is the storyteller, whether it's in Mali, Senegal, Burkina Faso, the Manding people, and even across other cultures in Africa. So he's a storyteller, but he's a keeper of oral traditions, whether it's the history of a village or a family. So that's where the thought of being a house of jelly, kind of like every single person has a story, and being a house is really a metaphor to bringing all of us together so that we can share our stories, our personal stories, so that we can build a common story, if you will. So what do? We use the arts and cultures to serve as an opportunity to educate and entertain. Educate, meaning educating, and I'll share my personal story, and all of this will come together. But educate in a sense that people of African descent across the world have somehow been separate. Although the roots are common, the experiences are very different. And unfortunately, we don't have too many platforms where people can interact and learn from each other. So House of Jelly has as an ambition to serve as that house where people can come to learn from one another, and entertainment, because, well, we have great arts, we have great music, we have films that are coming out of Africa, and contemporary visual arts, and all sorts of things that are coming that, provide that entertainment piece. And the other aspect is that we provide a mean, so we're a vehicle for artists to have their work seen by the public. So artists of African descent who may not have a mainstream platform or accessibility to big platforms, we want to be that place where they can come and be that bridge between the public that wants to see the work and the artist, because every artist creates work to be seen because they have a message to convey. So we've been hosting film screenings since 2017. That was the actual first film screening in Silver Spring. And since 2020, we've transitioned to online platforms by partnering with POV, which is public television. It's a branch of public television. And so we've been online since, but this year we're looking to transition back out now that the world is reopening. So we're looking to transition back out. And we started with film screenings because that was what was accessible to us at the time. But we're definitely looking to expand to literature, dance, and so many different, as we know, the umbrella of arts and culture is quite vast. So dance, literature, theater, visual arts, all sorts of things. And so we also have hosted a cross-cultural events in that the whole community is invited. It's not just people of African descent. And we create community gatherings and engage people in dialogue every single time that we have such opportunities to bring people together. So the why, that is always the question, right? The big question is the why. Why does House of Jelly exist? It's in part because of my own personal experience. So being from Cameroon, an African immigrant living in the US first, on the West Coast. I was in Phoenix, Arizona for 13 years prior to moving to Maryland. So now I've been here for 10 years. And being an art and culture lover, it was just a natural transition for me to fall into that. But it really came out of the personal interactions I had, whether it was with African Americans or Caribbean, noticing how big a misunderstanding exists across those communities, because we don't engage much with each other. People tend to isolate themselves, unfortunately, and not interact too much. So the feeling of, oh my goodness, well, we need to somehow be able to speak to each other. It's been with me for many years, but it really took root when I moved to the DMV because of its diversity. I mean, everybody from everywhere is here. And noticing how big actually the African community is here, and also the other diasporas, the African American, the Caribbean American, the Caribbean community as well. And it was just a natural, I can't say that I had a conscious moment where I said, okay, this is how it should be. It was more of an inspiration, I will say, that something like this needs to exist. Perhaps it's for my own sake, because they say you teach what you need to learn. Perhaps that's what it is. But I really just noticed how there's no communication. And I say, well, let me try to create something. I had that feeling again, let's create something. And out of all of those feelings and thoughts came out of House of Jelly. So some of the things that we've done, some of the things that we've done is, like I said, host film screenings. On the far left side, you can see the picture of a talk that I had with an artist from Cameroon, actually. We were talking about the intersection of art and activism. And so I've hosted a few things online. On that particular one was live on Facebook and YouTube. I've hosted some interviews with artists of African descent on YouTube. We've had some film screenings, as you can see, Quest, conversations with the two gentlemen in the middle there, where your cursor right there. Yes, thank you. So that one was in French because being bilingual, I do both. We were talking about the importance of preserving our native languages and in preserving culture. And the Rescue List is one of the other films. I mean, we have several that we've screened, but it's another one talking about human trafficking in Ghana. And the two up there are from the recent event we held in Rockville, and MJ Park, that you may know, was a part of that, celebrating women as peacekeepers and cultivating a culture of peace as women. That was the theme. So we had that. So these are just a few things that we've done so far. And we're definitely looking to expand. And like I said, to really go deeper into the arts and just bring it out to the community and interact with the community and engage with the community. So that is essentially all that I have in regards to House of Jelly, the organization. So, so here you have the contact information should you wish to stay in touch. And I am definitely looking forward to, having a dialogue with you and answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Claire. This is Tony. Several years ago, and I do not remember who, but my wife bought a doll, which was from a woman from Africa, it was a storyteller doll, and we still have it, but I don't know who that was who sold it to us.
Interesting.
This is Gloria Swearinga. I want to say kudos. I happen to be a soloist, and so I want to say kudos for recognizing what a magnet, what a glue that the arts can be in terms of bringing people together. I am, of all things, a minister, and I was in prison ministry for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And I think I've used music, to minister to offenders, to people who have serious disability challenges, and to get inside of personalities where I don't think I would ever be admitted were it not for the magic of art. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Clara. Just sounding the same note like other speakers, but I will have a couple of questions after a little bit of my summary. Of course, arts helps to promote a lot of dialogue around social justice issues.
Yes.
I used to run the global education programs for International Education Resource Network in Sierra Leone before I started the Gifted Foundation, before I came to the States. So one of the programs we helped out with children affected by conflicts was to use music, arts, and other forms of communication tools to help youth affected by war to engage in collaboration and help them redress from the ills of the past. So we collaborated with a project called Moving to the Beats, Mobilizing Youth, a program from Penn State here, and Woodcraft Folk in England, engaging youth in cross-cultural arts for dialogues such as yours. I want to ask the question, I took a little note here. How does the work you do bring peace through the arts and through the discussions on arts, especially with African Americans and Africans, especially with that divide? And can you also tell us what some of these misunderstandings were in terms of that interactions that were made as a result of the things you discovered when you were carrying out the projects with arts and African Americans?
Thank you for that. So again, that personal interaction, something that I remember very vividly, is still fairly young. I was going to finish college and I had our traditional attire because, hey, why not, right? And I was made fun of. I was told that today is not carnival. Why am I dressed like this? By somebody who looked like me. And that stood out to me as a bit odd. It's like, back home, this is normal. It's just like, okay, what's the big deal? But that stood out to me. First of all, you are here, you're trying to because French speaker, primary language is Douala, my mother's tongue, then French, then English. So you're trying to switch, trying to comprehend, what was he trying to say? Is it a joke? Is it this? You don't have the full understanding, but it stood out to me as a bit odd. And it made me question, like, why is he being aggressive towards me? But then later on, as I my understanding of the history of African American deepened, because I'm curious that way. I came to understand that it's just ignorance, and there's ignorance on both sides. It's ignorance from Africans because, truth be told, we come here, just isolate ourselves. We are in our little bubble, and we don't really take the time to learn about the experiences of our brothers and sisters here. We don't care. We're here. Not that we don't care. Maybe I said what I said. I stand by it. And it just, okay, you come here, you work, your 2-3 jobs, but then you're having children here. Do those children identify as Africans or African American? The experiences are going to be totally different than yours. So why not take the time to learn what has happened to the people who look like you, who've been here for centuries, right? And so that is, and also through conversations over the years with African Americans and Caribbean, that those are the things that always came up. Everybody accusing everybody, but really it stems from ignorance, and ignorance because we do not take the time to have meaningful, deep conversations with each other. In regards to the first question, if I recall, oh, please help me out and remind me.
Yeah, the two questions were, how do you bring, how do people bring peace through the arts and through the discussions on arts, especially African Americans? And can you tell us what some of these misunderstandings were?
Yes. So, okay, so going back to that, through the film screenings that we've hosted, one that generated a lot of discussions, it was a film titled Blacks and Jews. So looking at the relationship between the Black community in New York and the Jews, and a lot of people had a lot of things to say, especially African Americans. So bringing peace, I feel like the first step towards creating a world of peace, which I believe we can definitely accomplish, is by having honest dialogues. And I feel like the setting, or if you will, the gathering of those people and people lowering their guard, because like the Reverend said, arts and culture, it has a way of allowing people to just pause for a second, lower their weapons, and just breathe for a second and have conversations. So I feel like having those interactions is a first step towards creating peace, because it creates understanding. I hope I'm answering your questions.
Yeah. I truly agree that arts helps to foster understanding, peace, and dialogue, and that was used on many occasions during the conflicts back in Sierra Leone. As you may know, it engaged a lot of people from a broad spectrum of arts groups, from songwriters and musicians to poets and filmmakers and dramatists and playwrights, all in the bid to raise awareness about coexistence, reconciliation, hope. So arts is such a powerful tool, and I believe it could make a lot of understanding amongst people. I mean, even today, even with I would say, the disparities that exist between Africans and African Americans, and there should be a lot of dialogue, which is not there. I mean, there are lots of kind of a simmering animosity that leads there, kind of one person blaming the other. And so that kind of dialogue hasn't existed that could encourage the assimilation of the two parties. And because we all look alike, we take things for granted and we feel like everything is okay. Yes. But at some point, once the conversations heat up, you realize that it's not okay. There are lots of missing links here that needs to be put together. So arts really helps to foster that. And thank you for your presentation.
And thank you for that. And that's exactly, where we're headed. That's a bigger vision. It's to where we can, there's so many films that I've reached out to filmmakers because they talk about these things. We look the same, but our experiences are definitely not the same. And we need to give ourselves an opportunity, even going beyond the skin color with all communities. We have, if I don't know the experience of an Asian American, I don't know the experience, but if I take the time to actually sit down with somebody from that community, I may learn a thing or two. And it brings us back to our common humanity, because really
That's what it is.
I trained as a nurse, and we're going through, you know, on the inside, when they put a tube down, we're all pink inside.
Yeah.
You know, all organs are placed the same. It's the same, you know,
So
so
true.
yeah,
So true.
it's finding out what is our common humanity, how can we work together, you know. But being a person of African descent, of course, that's what I can relate to.
I have a question, Clara. Is there a difference between a jelly and a griot? We
No.
call them griot. Oh, they're the same. Okay. Except griots that I've known have been women, mostly here in the United States.
Interesting. Okay,
yeah.
sorry, please go ahead.
That's it. We
It's
have one in our congregation. We have well, she's African American, but she's a storyteller, but she also considers herself a griot. So, so I've had some wonderful experiences with griots.
It's interesting because in the Manding and Serer community, it was mainly men, but of course there's Jelly Muso, like they call it in Bambara, woman griot. So griot actually is the French. When the French came into that area, Burkina Faso, Mali, Senegal, they translated the word jelly in griot, you know, but it's a French, it derives from French, it's French, griot. Okay. I didn't want to use that term. I wanted to, you know, kind of stay closer to the original name, sure. But essentially it's the same thing, you know, the storyteller, reminding people of their own greatness.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Will, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to wait my turn though.
Okay.
Okay, well, question number one, do you have an actual, I don't know, a physical, I don't know, a building where your headquarters, or is this something you're running out of your own house?
My house is the House of Jelly at the moment.
Okay.
It's cost effective.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But you have aspirations.
Big ones, if I may say so myself, but yes, definitely. To have a space, that house where people can come and discover art and engage in conversation, and we can build community and, you know, and inspire each person to then go out and recreate that in their own environment. Yes.
So are you thinking that in the future this will be something like, I don't know, an art gallery, or an you know, a place where people come and display their art and people buy the art, and is that, I mean, is that what your vision is for the future? Or okay. Yes. Okay.
Yes, it will be, it will have, because it's already on paper, so it's a matter of time. But it will be made up of several things. Definitely an art space where people can purchase art. People can, you know, have like exhibitions and things of that nature. Film screenings can take part there, and all in all,
sell music CDs too.
Yes, music.
Love music.
Music, even taking into account food, you know, because food is a big part of people's cultures, as language is, and you know, clothing, all these different things. Yes, so definitely, but mainly the idea is to have a place for the community to gather and have conversations, you know. So yes, it's in the works.
Okay. Are you going to be doing something in collaboration with, well, I know of 2 Cameroonian restaurants in Silver Spring. One, of course, is, well, Roger Miller restaurant, which really should be Roger Miller restaurant.
Exactly.
And the other one is what, the Golf Lounge?
Yes, Golf Lounge.
Yeah, which is a very strange name. I don't know how I got that name, but anyway, I mean, if you're thinking about integrating, Cameroonian cuisine along with Cameroonian art and everything, I guess it seems like, although the guy who has owned and run the Roger Mila restaurant, as far as I know, he's Togolese. But the founder, I think, of it was Cameroonian, but I think this guy bought him out a long time ago. I might be wrong about some of those details, but I've been going to Roger Miller restaurant for like the last 10 years.
Oh,
and that guy knows me. He says, "Oh yeah, you're the Cameroon Peace Corps guy." Yeah. And then of course, there's been at least a few times when I've seen the Fillmore in downtown Silver Spring, who have been featuring Cameroonian musicians. And I was very interested in going, and then I saw the ticket prices. and I said, well, maybe not.
Yes. So definitely food, music, it has a way of bringing people together and entertaining, right? But then we can use that as a way also to include some education in there. So yes, definitely, I'm open to collaborations because I believe that collaboration is better than competition. At this moment, I'm a team of one, and that can be, perhaps you know what I'm talking about, it can be a bit of a challenge. So it's always good to have several people involved. And like people say back home, you can't wash your face with just one finger, you need your whole hand. So having people around is definitely people who see the vision, who understand it, and who we can collaborate is always welcome. Yes, so I'm open to that, absolutely.
Well, and then my other, go ahead, Gloria.
Sorry to interrupt, because I just find this discussion so exciting. Don't leave out those of us who want to learn. I can't tell you how much I learned by taking 5 children under my wings who was trapped in the awfulness of the 80s. They were straight out of Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I had to learn to speak Amharic in order to deal with it. But it was a wonderful experience to learn all about making injera and what butterbird was, which is some spices that you almost have to go to Ethiopia to receive. But the sharing of cultures and the blending of understanding through arts, through music, through worship, through all kinds of things, it was just invaluable.
Thank you. And I do like injera myself, so I do. Injera.
Yes.
And I'm going to visit the restaurant in Silver. I live in Jersey, but I'm about to make my 6th trip to Washington. I'm going to get a hold of Will about that restaurant he's been holding out on in Silver Spring. I want to try that. I gotta eat.
Gloria, you have to come to New York first before you go over to DC, right? So I can host you to a New York restaurant, even though I'm new here.
I'm afraid to tell. My godchildren are in New York. Normally I would have been to I know New York like the back of my hand. I mean, I lived in the graduate dorm at Columbia University, 116th Street in Amsterdam for 2 years. You can't lose me in New York, but there's just so many problems there right now. It's the only reason I haven't been.
Right. So I want to add, Clara, thinking about the wave of new technologies and social media that connects people together, new media like the TikToks and stuff that young people use, I realized that there are lots of African-American young people here who are engaged in this kind of cultural interaction online. And they get to get a sense of some of the cultures that have been exchanged from Africa because of this new media.
Yes.
And that is quite, a great awareness raising about the African culture that has been in the past was unheard of because of the lack of communication, but because of the fluidity of the new wave of technology, the internet, social media, that has at least created some link. And many really love the cultures, the costumes, and they reflect on the positive things that African can bring in spite of it, the horrendous history of all slavery that happened. There is also a very interesting aspect where people go in and they do their DNA, ancestral, and they go back to Africa, try to go back to their roots. These are all empowering. And I get a chance to speak to a couple of people. There's this guy who runs the Gondove Foundation in Sierra Leone. Isaiah Washington, I think he was a film actor on Grey's Anatomy. Yeah, so he traced his route back to Sierra Leone. He went to the Gondobe tribe in the south where his parents came from. And actually, the people acculturized him there and made him part of the community. They gave him a local name. They dressed him up. He had done a couple of visits there. So there is a lot of good embedded in things like this, both from the arts to new technology. So you can make use of the internet space and broaden your scope, as well as focus on a small team. I also started nonprofits back, so I know how hard it is. When you're the starter, it's a tough thing to always start and bring people who are honestly gonna be there. And if you don't test the waters, you won't know. So the best bet is to look at people who are passionate, who care about the arts and fosters social justice and peace, and see how you can collaborate first as volunteers and then elevate them to some roles as you get the resources. But at this point, I think like working alone is tough, but there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. So keep it up.
Thank you very much. Yes, definitely. We're doing the best with the Instagram page, YouTube. I'm looking to start back again producing the conversations with the artists, filmmakers. The word is coming to me in French. This illustrators. That's the word in English, illustrators. I've made some contact with people. So definitely Facebook also is the three platforms. Those are the three platforms that we have and that we use. But definitely, yes, it's the passion that keeps me motivated, of course, because it doesn't feel like anything. It feels like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So, and I trust that, in due time, the right people will show up. And thank you so much for your encouragement. I deeply appreciate that.
Yeah.
Great. The last thing I would say, this is Chatterbox Gloria Swearinga. The thing that is so relevant, everybody talks about people who look like us. I happen to be African American. That's the only connection I bore with my 5 beautiful children. They're all grown up now. Because, I don't know how many of you have seen anyone from that part of Africa, Ethiopia. They are very exotic looking, beautiful people. But the outward appearance doesn't matter. The important thing is the inner connectivity as you find your common humanity. So what you're doing is so important. Do keep it up, because we sort of we're turning what it means to move forward into an upside down cake. We're majoring on the minor. What we need to rediscover is our commonality, our common humanity, and we don't want to let that get lost.
Yes, thank you. And I think Will wanted to say something.
Yes, I just wanted to also encourage you very much on this, and I congratulate you for even getting this started and having these aspirations and ambitions. I want to especially, agree with what you and Andrew were saying about the lack of the ignorance, the lack of information. That it has been shocking to me how ignorant Americans in general are of Africa. And maybe that's understandable, but I think it's not so much understandable among African Americans, because it's now been at least 50 or 60 years since we've had this Afro awakening, I mean, it was in the late 60s, early 70s when all these African Americans started demanding to have courses on, you know, African history, African American history, and all this. But I've met very few African Americans who know very much at all about Africa these days, and even among white people, even much less. And I just find that, it's frustrating to me that the total lack of interest in that. So I think that's what needs to be out there. I mean, there was a brief moment back in the late 60s and early 70s when, you know, American pop music, people were aware of Miriam Makeba and Hugh Masekela and Manu Dibango.
Yes.
You know, but if you were just to go up to the average American now, whether African American or not, and say, okay, who's your favorite African musician? Well, they wouldn't have the faintest idea. And to tell you the truth, I don't really know very much about modern African Americans. I know that period when I was over there in the mid 80s, the late 80s, and all that. But when I talk about those artists to other people, their eyes glaze over.
Yes, nowadays they have the Burna Boys, the Davido, you know, music from Nigeria it's been big for several years, but you know.
But I was in the generation of Les Têtes Brûlées.
Yeah, Les Têtes Brûlées. Oh, yes.
I saw them in concert.
You also need to understand the wider cultural problem. When have you heard a recording of Miriam Makeba? Not recently.
No, not recently.
There is not the inclusivity that would have the average African knowing anything about Africa. I learned because of my involvement with people. And I think unless you are fortunate enough to fall into a situation where you got 10 kids, and that's how many there were. I took 5 and found homes for the other 5 and had to be in charge of that project until everybody became legal. But that's a wider cultural problem than why don't we African Americans know more about Africa? There's a whole lot we need to know more about that is almost intentionally buried in places where we cannot reach it. Some of us are just fortunate enough to dig a little harder, or life throws a ball at us that we're not interested in dodging, and so we learn. It's a bit more complicated than, you know, why don't we know?
And I totally hear both of you, and thank you for sharing your you know, your thoughts about that. And I feel personally that's where the Africans can step in and engage our brothers from here in dialogue, like, okay, well, you don't know this, instead of being frustrated and saying what they did, they and pointing fingers. It's like, well, let me take this opportunity as a teaching opportunity. What can I share with this person so that you know, their perspective, their mind expands a little bit more. So I feel like as an African, at least for me, it has been, okay, well, they don't know this, realizing, or they don't know this. Well, let me share what I do know, you know, and of course I cannot speak for all of Africa, but I can say, well, in Cameroon, in my tribe, this is how, this means this, we do this, we eat this and whatever. I've had a friend of mine who's African-American. She I cooked her okra soup and she ate okra soup for the first time and she ate it, but she was mad at me because I had put pepper in there, and she's like, you're trying to kill me. She was like, you're trying to kill me. Exactly. But you know, little things like that, and me learning how, you know, cornbread and so something simple as food can open the door for so many opportunities to learn about the culture, you know. So definitely it's something that I have, because maybe you can tell, I have so many ideas. It brews in here and I have so many notes, but in due time, everything will come. I will birth it all eventually.
Okay. Yeah, I want to add just briefly that because Africa is so diverse, you know, and because even for us from Africa, we have to study volumes to understand some of the culture, even within our
Yes.
country.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of things, but that history and that connections on the levels of arts, culture, you know, all that can help. I recalled back in the days when I was studying history at Ruby College, I had to study African history, and all across Africa, North Africa, you know, South, etc. And you cannot even complete everything, let alone you cannot even start studying. So it's a lot of learning curve here, and the process can start from like a dialogue and, you know, at the restaurant or maybe in the public sphere. I engage people all the time. You know, most times in Cadensville, I used to have a
That's
couple
an
of
understatement.
African culture.
That's an understatement. Oh my God.
So yeah, it's so important. So the work you do really can go a long way in enriching the understanding of not just African Americans or ourselves from Africa, but across the vast cultural divide.
Yes.
Paulette?
Will?
You know,
Yeah,
this is
that's
Tony again,
Bill.
Clara. There was a really wonderful series that was on public television about African history that Skip Gates did. I don't know if you've had a
Yes.
chance to see it, but it
Yes.
was a real eye-opener for me about things I had no idea had occurred
Yeah.
in Africa.
It's such a rich culture that, like Andrew said, you could spend a lifetime just studying. I mean, I learned a little Amharic, but I don't speak Tigrinya. I do not speak Aristria. I mean, just in Ethiopia alone, you have all of these. And when you start delving into all of the cultures, you have languages upon languages upon languages, and you have customs upon customs. It's fascinating, and it's a wonderful opportunity when anyone opens the door so you can learn about all of this.
Yes. Thank
Yep.
you.
Paulette, this is Bill.
Yes. Bill, go ahead.
Since I'm on the phone, I didn't have the benefit of seeing the slides or any text that might have
I'll
accompanied
send
them.
them out. I
Well,
can
thank
send
you,
them
because
out. So when you get on your Wi-Fi, you'll be able to see them. And hopefully I'll be
Okay, I'd
able to
like to do-
retrieve the recording too.
I look forward to that. I wanted to be able to forward her slides to a young man in Greenbelt who 3 or 4 years ago started an art space. It has existed in donated space in Beltway Plaza, which is an old shopping mall. But he's expanding, and he does have programs. He gives away books and a variety of items. Has classes and programs for youth in the neighborhood in which Beltway Plaza exists, and he's expanding. And I don't know that he has had any adult programming, but I think you might benefit from seeing the slides and being able to get in touch with her.
You should
if I have
connect him to Clara. Yeah.
Well,
Where
that's why
does
I'm
he
hoping
live?
that he lives in Greenbelt.
Greenbelt, okay.
And the art space is in Greenbelt, and he's expanding. And if I can get her contact information, when you forward me the slides, I can forward them to him.
Okay. Is that
Thank you
okay
for that.
with you, Clara?
Yes, it is. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
The
Super.
only other thing I wanted to say is that I agree with Gloria. It doesn't matter the hue of our skin. It only matters that all of us don't have hemorrhoids. And so with that,
Okay.
Anytime you want to leave, Bill, I'll shut the door behind you.
Yeah,
I
okay.
will stay till
So,
you go, Gloria.
Sorry, Claire, that was in reference to something that was being talked about before you joined this meeting.
Okay.
That was meant
Well,
to be
she's
an insider joke.
Inside joke. Okay.
Yeah,
But
Yeah,
she's
you
entitled
really
to hear
don't
our
wanna
base humor.
Go into
okay. And then, Clara, before you go, I want to know, okay, it's been a long time since I've been in Cameroon, and I've tried keeping up with it. And certainly I know a whole lot more about what's been going on in Cameroon or Ethiopia than most other Americans on there. But I am still just kind of at a loss about exactly why the things that have, I mean, compared with when I was in Cameroon back in the mid 1980s, it seems that Cameroon has well, it's gone downhill a lot in there, and a lot of it there's a number of things. One of them is the Anglophone region trying to break away. And I don't really fully understand that. And I don't really fully understand why the national government, the Francophone government, isn't engaging more in dialogue there. And from my point of view, I think it's just like, well, unfathomable why there is this such conflict over whether they're adopting the French system or the English system, when they should be both sides adopting a Cameroonian system. Instead, it seems like they're having a war over which colonial system is going to win out.
Thank you.
Can you give me any more insight into that? Or one of the most bits of Africa that have been in the news recently was that brief civil war over in Ethiopia. Can you give us any insights into exactly why they were, actually going to war, at what they were even going to war over in that?
So as far as Ethiopia is concerned, I myself, I'm trying to learn, because I know, the Oromo, for a long time, which is a different tribe, they have felt that they've been oppressed, and essentially they want out. But I do not know the details of it all, so I cannot speak on that. That's all I know, and I haven't been following it closely. As far as Cameroon is concerned, also, in 2016, it started with when the teachers so Cameroon is bilingual, one of few countries around the world, but specifically French and English. So it's only Canada and Cameroon that have those two languages as official languages in the world. So out of 10 provinces, which could states, if but 10 provinces, 2 of them are English speaking, because they used to be part of the Southern Cameroons. And then in October 1960, the 1st of October 1960, they joined with the French-speaking Cameroon, which was under the rule of France, and the other 2 provinces were under the rule of England. So at any point, we come along in the 80s, right? We 80s babies. And this is what we're brought up with. If you're born on the French side, you do the French educational system. And if you're in either of the 2 other provinces, it's the British system. And it's been that way since I can remember. So in 2016, the teachers from one of the provinces, they went on strike because they wanted better pays, and they had other things that they were asking for. And they wanted to change the GCE, which is like the high school exam before you go. So yeah, Sierra Leone is the same system. So the GCE, before, which is like the exam before going into university, and they wanted to change that into Francophone. It's like, why? Just keep the same thing. Either, like you said, either have a national system, Cameroonian system, or just don't bother, leave it alone. So again, because I don't live there and I haven't been back home in years, actually since I left, I haven't been back home. So I'm also following it from afar, just like anybody else. But what I do know is that it escalated to the point where people were like, well, they also, like the Oromo, they feel oppressed. They feel like, which is true, because I've witnessed it, they feel less than Cameroonians, because the majority is Francophone, right? French speaking. The government from the time of Aïdjo, the first president, post-colonial, it's always been with the French, somebody from the French speaking side of Cameroon. And so they felt for the longest time like unseen, unheard, not valued as citizens. And so they just decided that, well, maybe we need to just either connect with Nigeria or just stand on our own. And that's where this whole thing, it has escalated to the point where it's now what, 16, 22, so 7 years. It's still going on. People are still dying. And it's unfortunate, like you said, that the government in place from how I see it, the humanity of these people is not being valued, because if it's valued, you will engage in conversation and try to find a solution, but unfortunately it's not. And also we know that there are financial interests for some of these people in power that supersede the needs of the people, you know, and it's unfortunate, but that it just seems like, you know, that colonial power is still very much there, because it dictates to the people who are puppets what to do and when to do it. So unfortunately, that's just how it is. That's how I've seen it. And I'm sure that people on the ground will tell you horror stories, because even you go on social media, blasting Bamenda, blasting here, where this, Manfe this, even Manfe Kumba, you know, all this, it's just like, come on, 7 years, what are we doing? So to me, there's a lack of desire to solve the problem from the people in the country in power. Leave the international community alone. Solve your own problems. If you really believe in these people, if you really respect their humanity, solve the problem. But that's all I can say.
Yeah. Well, let me just ask you this in particular.
Bram has a question.
Yes.
Bram has a question.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Can we finish with Will, if you don't mind? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. And this might be very quick and easy. Okay. Is there still a separate gendarmerie and Royal Constabulary?
No.
Those are two different police forces. One was British based and one was French based. Do they still have those as separate, or have all police been incorporated into one police force?
It's been incorporated into one. The gendarmerie now, it's everywhere, you know, so.
Okay,
But
so there
it's
is
still
no
the-
more Royal Constabulary.
No, but it's.
And was
based
that
on-
part of what the Anglophones were fighting about?
Well, really, from my understanding, the main thing is the lack of respect from the other Cameroonian, being seen as less than, which is totally understandable. Like, you cannot disrespect somebody's humanity to, you know, until when? Until when?
And how big of a part of the problem is it that Paul Biya has just been clinging on to power for so long?
I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah.
That is a no comment for me. That's like, as long as I have been alive, he's been president.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it seems to me that I mean, if he were, I mean, he is going to die at some point, right? And I hope that doesn't mean that Cameroon descends even worse into like a total failed state, because they're all fighting over who's going to succeed him as the big man on that. But do you have hope that when he does go, that there's actually a positive outlook for actually addressing some of these things?
Well, I do have hope not only for Cameroon, but for the whole continent, because if you look at the statistics, there are more youth in Africa than anywhere else in the world. And they are awakening to the fact that we need to reclaim our identity as people. You know, we need to stand up, and they have, the young generation, they have different ideas than my generation or the ones before mine. They have different thoughts, different ways of seeing the world. So I do, as far as Cameroon is concerned, I have hope that the youth will somehow get enlightened, be curious enough to learn from other people what has happened in Sudan, what has happened in, you know, the Arab Spring, all these movements that are grassroots and that are led by the youth. They can change, youth, really, I believe they can change the world. So my hope is that they really awaken to the power of the youth that they have and shift the narrative, because we need to pass from being victims to being the, you know, to own up our story and to create the lives that we desire. So that's my hope.
And that's where you step in as the artists. The people of the arts are the people that will lead to that kind of of, I don't know, just-
Revolution.
yeah, and it can start out as a cultural revolution.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes.
Aram, go ahead.
Oh, good. Is the will finished or done? I mean, don't be shy, Will. I mean, we are all here sitting
Well,
and waiting for
You
you
know
to
what a
talk.
shrinking violet I am.
Yes, and you don't know that there is a raise hand button down there. You just
Oh,
talk. Okay. Well, my question is basically, I'm wondering, is there a movement to get rid of these colonial cultures, English and French, and come to a national, I mean, original native language culture?
Not to my knowledge. As far
Why
Sorry?
not? This is so a big shock to me.
it will be because if you look at it right, in some countries it's very, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's more, what is the word, homogeneous. You know, they can, yeah. In Cameroon, you have over 250 languages and probably as many tribes, because there are tribes within tribes and, you know, many tribes. And so if we start counting, officially, we have over 250 languages in Cameroon alone. So as far as the colonial aspect is concerned, the bits that I know, financial, the colonial powers have a lot of financial stake in the countries. You know, they have a lot of power financially, which kind of keeps those countries, not only Cameroon, but others also in an awkward position, you know, because you have all this debt, you can't really get rid of it. You have all these partnerships that were made many years before, you can't really get out of it. In French, they call them plan quinquennal, which is like 50-year plans, you know, like you can't get out of a contract. It's like a contract. You're in it for 50 years and sometimes it's renewed. So you end up with something 150 years. How are you going to get out of it? I don't know personally, and maybe a whole bunch of people need to come together to figure that out. But to answer your question, nothing that I know of.
I have a follow-up on that. It was said that Muammar Gaddafi was trying to make a united Africa, but then he was punished for that and he was killed by the US. Was there some kind of a movement around that? Secondly, now China is playing a good role around the world by building roads while US is bombing, China is building. So maybe, and China does a lot in Africa. Maybe some of that work will end up in more independence for Africa and getting rid of the colonial characters and culture.
Well, personally, I don't think it's the same thing. It's like watching the same film, but with a different actor. I feel that everybody comes there to take something from Africa, and people don't really come to empower, or if they come under the guise of empowerment, they're also getting something, obviously. So I think it will be up to us as Africans to say no to all of these powers, or to sit down at the table and say, well, you're not going to take advantage of me, and this is what you get, and be the leader of it, you know, as opposed to being told what to do, which is the recurring theme when you hear people who are on the ground. That's what they're saying, that it's kind of like a different form of colonization all over again with China. You know, yes, they're building, yes, they're contributing, but they're buying land taking it from the nationals. And how is that different from how?
I'm sorry, that's U.S. propaganda, anti-Chinese.
I don't think so, because this is what people on the ground are saying. There are Africans living in those countries.
So I would say, I will add that, you know.
Could let me break in here. It's 4 o'clock. I know we would love to continue this conversation, but we actually have more of the agenda to finish. So I'm just going to say thank you so much, Clara. And perhaps we can continue this dialogue another time. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Clara.
so much.
Thank
And I
you,
look
Clara.
forward, who knows, to speaking with you in the future. Thank you.
All right.
Thank
And
you,
say,
Clara.
say hello to
Bye.
Sylvie
Thank you,
Bello for
Clara.
me.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, I am